My name is Marin, and at 41 years old, I have learned that silence can be sharper than any argument. I have spent nearly 2 decades inside glass offices where men raise their voices and women are expected to smile through humiliation. But that morning, I had no intention of smiling. The call came at 9:10. "Human Resources needs to see you," the assistant said. Her tone clipped, uneasy. When I stepped into the small conference room, the air was already heavy with something rehearsed. The HR manager, Dana, kept her eyes on a folder. "Marin, is there something you haven't told us before I could answer?" The door burst open. Caleb Mercer strode in 30-something, flushed, expensive suit hanging off arrogance. Acting Chief Operating Officer, son of the founder. He didn't even glance at Dana. He pointed at me instead. "You embarrassed me in front of the investors," he said, voice rising with each word. "You'll apologize right now. I had corrected his false data 2 days ago during a federal client briefing. It had saved the company from a compliance violation that could have cost millions. But facts were irrelevant when ego was wounded. I won't apologize for being right." I replied. My voice was steady, almost too calm. His face darkened. "Then you're done here. Effective immediately." He slammed his palm on the table, a hollow sound that made Dana flinch. I stood, unpinned my badge, and set it beside his hand. "Thank you," I said quietly. "Maybe I should have told you sooner." He blinked, thrown off balance, told me what I didn't answer. I turned toward the hallway, my heels echoing against the marble floor. Behind me, someone called my name, but I kept walking. The security guard met me by the elevator. He didn't speak either. Outside, Boston's cold wind hit my face like clarity. I exhaled and felt the tension leave my shoulders, years of warnings ignored, nights lost, loyalty wasted. 48 hours, I thought. That was all it would take for them to understand what I hadn't told them, and for the first time in years, I smiled. When I joined Helion Analytics 8 years ago, the office still smelled of new paint and ambition. I was the first woman to lead their compliance division, a novelty they paraded in press releases but quietly doubted in boardrooms. They told me I was a bold choice. I learned quickly that bold meant alone. Back then, I had a team of 6. We were supposed to build the company's regulatory framework from the ground up. Within 2 years, budget cuts trimmed the department to 3. By the 5th year, it was just me. The workload didn't shrink, it tripled. I warned them about system audits skipped to save time, about encryption renewals left pending. Every time. Caleb Mercer brushed it off. "We're not the government, Marin. We move fast," he said. Grinning like speed was a virtue. He was still a junior executive then, barely 30, already fluent in the language of power. I tried to keep things professional, but there was always that edge, the unspoken certainty that his name would protect him from consequences mine never could. One winter, during a quarterly review, I told the leadership team we were one compliance failure away from disaster. The CFO nodded absently, tapping his pen. Caleb leaned back and smirked. "You worry too much. That's why we pay you to worry so the rest of us don't have to." That line stuck with me. They wanted my diligence, not my voice. At home, my son Ethan would wait up, lights still on at midnight. "Mom, are you done saving the world yet?" he'd tease. Half asleep on the couch. "Not tonight, I'd say." Shutting my laptop. People count on me. He didn't know that those people rarely listened. Still, I kept going, patching weaknesses no one else saw, documenting everything in reports no one ever read. I told myself it mattered. Until the day I realized the only thing more dangerous than being unheard was being the only one holding the whole structure together. The presentation room was packed that morning. Federal clients, auditors, and every executive who usually pretended compliance didn't exist. I stood at the back, laptop open, running the live data feed. Caleb Mercer was at the podium. Perfect smile, perfect suit, perfect lies. He was presenting a quarterly security update, numbers that looked clean too clean. I had checked the logs myself hours earlier. One figure stood out, a section marked full audit compliance achieved. It wasn't true. The review was still pending. Caleb's voice echoed through the glass room. As you can see, Helion's system meets every federal benchmark. I felt my pulse quicken. My name was on those filings. If he signed off false data, the entire contract could collapse. I raised my hand. That benchmark isn't complete yet. Heads turned. Caleb paused, his smile twitching. Excuse me. The compliance review for the encryption protocol is still under audit, I said. It's not finalized. Reporting it as complete could invalidate the certification. A murmur spread across the table. One of the federal representatives frowned. Is that correct? Ms. Vale? I met his eyes. It is. Caleb's jaw tightened. We'll have that updated immediately, he said through his teeth. He moved on, his voice thinner, his charm cracked. After the meeting, I barely made it to my desk before his shadow fell across it. You made me look incompetent, he hissed. I looked up from my keyboard. I didn't make you look that way. I just stopped you from proving it. His face went red. You will apologize. Marin, in front of the board. No. He leaned closer. Do you understand who you're talking to? Yes, and that's exactly why I'm saying no. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he smiled, not the polished one from the stage, but something smaller, colder. You'll regret that. He walked away, leaving the faint scent of his cologne and the weight of a promise I already knew he'd keep. The morning after that presentation, I received an encrypted message marked Priority Internal Transfer Helion Parent Corporation. It was short. You are reassigned to oversee the Department of Energy audit. Clearance confirmation in 48 hours. Maintain operational silence until verified. I read it 3 times before it sank in. The audit was federal, sealed under a Class A confidentiality clause, until clearance was active. I couldn't mention it to anyone, not even my own department. My official title stayed the same, but my duties changed completely. That afternoon, Dana from Human Resources called me in. Marin, she began, her voice cautious. We've received reports you might be working on something outside of Helion. Is that correct? I met her gaze. I'm following corporate directive. What kind of directive? I can't disclose that. She hesitated, fingers hovering over her notepad. You're saying you're doing work off record? No, it's fully authorized, just not by you. She frowned. If you're working elsewhere, it could violate your employment agreement. It doesn't, I said quietly. You'll have documentation soon, before I could say more. The door swung open. Caleb stepped in without knocking, his tone already sharp. You see, Dana. She's admitting it. Outside work. It's not what you think. I said, then explain. I can't. He laughed under his breath. Convenient. I'm under federal confidentiality. Federal confidentiality. He repeated mockingly. That's a new one. Dana tried to intervene. Caleb, maybe we should verify with... He cut her off. No. We're not waiting while she hides behind excuses. I stood, tired of the performance. You're making a mistake. He smirked. If you were in my position, you'd do the same. No, I said. If I were in your position, I'd know what I was doing. His eyes narrowed, but he said nothing else. That conversation lasted less than 10 minutes, but it changed everything. 48 hours later, when the system tied to that same federal audit began to fail, they finally understood what I hadn't been allowed to tell them. When I stepped out of Helion's tower, the wind off the harbor cut straight through my coat. For the first time in 8 years, my phone didn't vibrate with alerts. No midnight pings, no flagged emails, no urgent requests that could have waited until morning. Just silence. I walked for blocks without direction until I saw a small cafe tucked between brick buildings. Inside, the air smelled of roasted beans and old wood. Lydia, a project analyst who had left Helion months earlier, looked up from her laptop and froze. Marin, what happened? I sat across from her, my fingers still cold. They fired me. Her eyes widened. You're kidding. I wish I were. Why I stirred the coffee the barista had just set down. Because I refused to apologize, and because I couldn't tell them what I was actually working on. She leaned closer. The federal audit I didn't answer. Just met her eyes. That was enough. She exhaled slowly. Caleb. Who else? Lydia shook her head. He's going to regret that. I gave a small, quiet laugh. He already has. He just doesn't know it yet. Outside the window, the sky over the harbor turned pale gray. The city was waking up. Helion's servers would be, too, somewhere on the 30th floor. The automated compliance renewal would begin the one that required my cryptographic key to complete the Department of Energy's verification upload. Without that key, the system would stall. Back at the cafe, Lydia glanced at her watch. So, what are you going to do now? I'm going to finish my coffee, I said. And not think about Helion for once? I meant it, at least for that moment. The company that had taken nearly everything from me was now on a clock it didn't know existed. By the time I left the cafe, the wind had picked up, scattering thin flakes of snow across the sidewalk. I zipped my coat and kept walking, letting the silence stretch. For the first time in years, it sounded like peace. By the next morning, my inbox was a storm I refused to open. Unread messages stacked higher with every minute subject lines screaming urgent from people who had ignored me for years. I left the phone face down on the counter and poured another cup of coffee. Lydia called first. Marin, have you seen the news? No, Helion's portal is down. Federal clients can't log in. I almost smiled. It's the renewal window. They'll figure it out. Her voice dropped. Without your key, silence hung between us. She knew the answer. I didn't need to say it. At Helion, chaos was spreading. I could picture it, the flicker of screens, Caleb's temper breaking through his polished calm. I imagined his voice cutting through the open floor. It's a minor glitch. Tell the board we're running diagnostics. Someone from IT would correct him quietly. Sir, the compliance upload was authorized only under Marin Vale's encryption key. We can't bypass it. Then reset it. It's a federal channel, sir. Resetting voids the certification. Caleb would curse under his breath, pull at his tie, and demand answers. None would come. Meanwhile, HR would finally dig deeper into my file. Dana would scroll through the digital archives until she hit a restricted folder, corporate legal clearance pending. A sealed memo from the parent company marked Class A Confidential. She'd open it, read the authorization code, and whisper, "Oh my God." She'd rush down the hall toward Caleb's office. You fired her during active clearance. He'd stare at her. What does that mean? It means we violated a federal contract. That would be the first time the word panic appeared in anyone's mind, though no one would dare speak it. My phone kept buzzing on the counter, relentless. I finally turned it over. 24 missed calls, most from numbers I recognized all too well. I set it back down. They'll manage, I said aloud, to no one. But the truth was already unfolding in quiet increments, spreading through every floor of that glass tower like a slow, inevitable collapse. By the second morning, Boston's skyline looked the same, but Helion's world was burning. I didn't have to check the headlines to know it had gone public. Lydia sent a link anyway. Federal watchdogs open investigation into Helion Analytics compliance breach. I scrolled past it and set the phone aside. I had already started drafting an agreement with a consulting firm in Chicago. They had offered me a position the night before, half the hours, twice the respect. At Helion, the board had convened an emergency session. The messages flooding my voicemail painted the picture clearly enough. Caleb's voice, clipped and tired. We're experiencing an unexpected system stall. Just call me back. Then, Dana Marin, please. This isn't about blame anymore. Then, a new one older, colder, familiar, Ms. Vale. This is Robert Mercer. I've just landed. We need to talk. I sat very still, listening to that one again. His voice carried the authority that used to make entire departments freeze, but now it just sounded heavy, worn. At that exact hour, in the 30th floor boardroom, I could imagine Robert standing at the head of the table, coat still on, eyes locked on his son. "You fired her during an active federal clearance," he'd ask. Caleb's tone would waver. She refused to disclose. She wasn't allowed to disclose. Robert's voice would cut through the room. "You didn't even check silence." A board member would slide a printed report across the table. "The Department of Energy has suspended Helion's certification pending review. If we fail to restore access by tomorrow, they'll terminate the contract." Robert would press both hands on the table, knuckles white. "Get her back." I looked down at my phone, the red icon flashing with missed calls. I deleted Robert's voicemail without saving it. The company that had ignored every warning I'd given was finally listening to the sound of its own collapse. The second call came just after noon. This time, the number wasn't blocked. I let it ring twice before answering. "Marin." Robert Mercer's voice was steady, but beneath it I heard exhaustion. "We're in the main conference room. The federal system will revoke our license by midnight if the upload isn't complete. We need your help." I didn't speak right away. In the background, I could hear muffled voices, board members, legal counsel, Caleb. Their silence felt heavier than his words. "Robert," I said evenly, "you're asking for consultation services. That means I set the terms." He exhaled. "Name them. Remote assistance only." I began. "No in-person meetings. No system access. Your team follows my instructions exactly." "That's acceptable. Prepaid consulting fee $50,000 per hour. 4-hour minimum." Someone in the background muttered something sharp. "Probably Caleb." I continued before anyone could argue. "And a written apology, signed by your son and the board, publicly acknowledging the mistake." Robert hesitated. "You're serious?" "Completely." There was shuffling, a few whispered arguments. Then Caleb's voice broke through, tight and brittle. "This is blackmail." "No," I said quietly. "This is the cost of ignoring warnings." Robert's tone hardened. "Enough. Caleb, you created this mess. I was trying to protect the company," Caleb snapped. "By destroying it," Robert shot back. "Apologize." The silence that followed was long enough for me to imagine the look on Caleb's face, the same one I'd seen in that meeting when I refused to bow. Finally, I heard him inhale. "I'm sorry," he said, the words barely audible. "That's not enough," Robert murmured. "You'll sign the letter." I didn't smile, but something in my chest eased. "When the payment clears and I receive the letter," I said, "I'll begin." "We'll have it within the hour," Robert replied. "Just tell us what to do." I hung up, the quiet in my apartment almost peaceful. For the first time in years, they were ready to listen, not because I demanded respect, but because failure had finally made them humble. By the time the payment confirmation came through, the clock on my screen read 11:32. I opened the secure link Robert's assistant had sent, entered my credentials, and saw the Helion interface for the first time since I'd walked out. The dashboard was bleeding red timeouts, failed verifications, cascading errors in bright warning text. A dozen faces appeared on my video feed. Engineers I had trained years ago. Their voices overlapped, brittle with panic. "Ms. Vale, we've lost 3 authentication nodes. The system won't accept new keys. The department portal is locked." "Stop talking," I said quietly. "Share your screen." They obeyed instantly. I guided them step by step, tracing through corrupted logs and missing certificates. Every command I gave, I'd once written into a training manual no one had ever bothered to read. "Reset the secondary token," I said. "No gracefully. Don't force it." "Yes." "Ma'am," one replied, his voice trembling. From the far end of the conference table, I heard Robert. "How long?" "Marin, 3 hours if they follow directions. 5 if anyone improvises." Nobody dared improvise. Caleb stayed silent. Once, I caught a glimpse of him in the reflection on someone's camera, pale, motionless. The confidence drained from his face. At 2:47, the final diagnostic ran green. The federal portal reconnected, and the confirmation light blinked across the main dashboard. Helion's license was safe. A cheer broke out, hesitant at first. then genuine. I muted the call and leaned back in my chair. My laptop chimed a deposit notice. $200,000, exactly as agreed. Another message followed a link to a press statement titled, Helion Analytics acknowledges internal error. Commends former compliance architect for her assistance. Caleb's signature was at the bottom. I read it once, then closed the file. Outside my kitchen window, dawn was pushing against the skyline. The city was quiet, and for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for an alarm. I poured another cup of coffee, letting the warmth settle into my hands. Somewhere in that tower, someone would finally read the manuals. 6 weeks later, I walked onto the stage at the Liberty Wharf Conference Center, the lights low enough that I could almost pretend it wasn't full. The sign behind me read, Veil Integrity Systems, my own company, registered and growing faster than I'd dared hope. When I first left Helion, I thought I was done with corporate speeches, but this invitation had felt different. The symposium was focused on ethical compliance and human accountability in cybersecurity, exactly what I had fought for and nearly lost everything to defend. I adjusted the microphone. Good morning, I began, my voice steady. I used to think compliance was about control rules, audits, endless paperwork, but it's really about trust. Without transparency, no system, no company, no person survives for long. The audience leaned in, quiet and intent. I told them about my new approach, small teams, full disclosure, no buried warnings, a place where listening was part of the job description. A few heads nodded, a few scribbled notes. When the applause came, it felt earned, not loud, but sincere. Then, as I scanned the crowd, I saw him. Caleb Mercer stood near the back wall. No lanyard, no badge. He looked older somehow, his confidence stripped down to silence. For a heartbeat, our eyes met. He didn't look away. After the session, he approached slowly, waiting until the others had moved on. Marin, he said quietly. I nodded. Caleb, you built something real. I built what I always wanted to. I answered, where people are heard before things break. He swallowed hard. I'm trying to start over. I hope you do. He gave a small, tired smile. Thank you for helping when you didn't have to. I met his gaze, calm and steady. I didn't do it for you. He nodded once and walked away. I returned to the stage to gather my notes, the sound of the harbor faint beyond the glass. Before leaving, I looked at the screen one last time. Transparency isn't a threat. I had said, it's what keeps a company alive. And that, I thought, was finally true.